Yes, guys, welcome back to the MMA Sucker Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Frazer Krohn, and I just wanted to start today's video off by saying thank you for the support. Obviously, I've taken the podcast and I've started doing the podcast a lot more often again in recent weeks, and some of the feedback that I've got on a lot of the videos that I've done has been really, really good. The Canelo and Crawford breakdown after the reaction to the fight last week did great numbers. The breakdown before the fight did great numbers. I released a video this week as well looking at the UFC Not J card from last week. That did great numbers. And I released a video looking at some improvements to EA UFC 6, the rumoured new UFC game coming out maybe this year, maybe at the beginning of next year. So I just wanted to start today off by saying thank you. And now we'll get into the full podcast where it's going to be a breakdown of this upcoming weekend's UFC card. The UFC goes down under again. They return to Perth, Western Australia, for a really good, solid fight night. Especially if you're an Aussie, if you're an Australian, because I think it's only one fight on the card doesn't feature an Australian fighter. I'm going to focus on the main event because I think that's the fight that people are interested in on this card. But I'm also going to look at a couple of the fights up and down the card, and then I'm going to go on to talk about the disappointing news about UFC Rio in a few weeks and why that card at the moment is frustrating me. But first, UFC Perth, UFC Fight Night Perth goes down on the 27th of the month, so next Saturday. It says 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm not quite sure what time the guys will be making their ring walks for a fight night. I imagine it would still be at night, so it might be a good time for us Brits, but probably not a great time for the American fans. But we've got number 3 Carlos Ulberg in the light heavyweight division taking on number 8 Dominick Reyes. Now, if you'd have told me a few years ago that this would be a headlining fight, I'd have been surprised. So I thought Dominick Reyes had kind of peaked. He'd peaked when he fought John Jones back in, let me just double check when it was, back in 2020. Wow. 2020, he was undefeated, 11-0. 12-0 when he fought John Jones. He then went on a 4-fight losing streak. He lost to Jones, very, very close decision. I actually scored it for Jones. If you go back and watch my series, rescoring controversial decisions, I actually did score it for Jones, despite sort of going against the grain in that one. He then got knocked out pretty brutally by Jan Blachowicz. He then got knocked out pretty brutally by Jiří Procházka, and then he was knocked out by Ryan Spann. He then took 2 years off, and this is a fight that I didn't actually realise had been booked twice previously. Ulberg withdrew with an injury the first time, that was at UFC 297, and then there was a UFC Fight Night card on that was actually headlined by Blanchfield and Fierro, where this fight was supposed to go down again. It didn't. And it's probably a good thing for Dominick Reyes because he's then, since those original fights, he's then really got back to some good form. He beat just Dustin Jacoby by finish, he beat Anthony Smith by finish, and he beat Nikita Krylov by finish. Am I saying that these guys are at the upper echelon of the division? No. Dustin Jacoby is a solid all-round kickboxer, but he's never going to quite break into that top 10, really, in my opinion. Anthony Smith, if this wasn't his retirement fight, it should have been. No, he had a retirement fight, one fight after against Zhang Mingyang. And then Nikita Krylov. It was a good win on paper, but the performance that Krylov put in against Guskov last time out, perhaps that win doesn't age as well as it maybe should. He's taken on Carlos Ulberg, Dominick Reyes, who has been on a rich vein of form. Undefeated. Oh no, he's got one loss in the UFC in his debut. Since then, he's beaten some good guys. Alonzo Menafield, a really good win. Volkan Ozdemir, really good win. Jan Blachowicz, last time out, really good win. That was a unanimous decision. I know a lot of people scored it for Jan Blachowicz, and it was definitely a closer fight than many remember. That was in March of this year. I'm surprised at why these two men are fighting, because the UFC rankings have these guys ranked, like I said, number 3 and number 8. in the light heavyweight division. This fight is huge and has huge implications on the light heavyweight division, especially because you've got two key matchups happening in the light heavyweight division a week after this card at UFC 320. You've got the rematch between Magomed Ankalaev and Alex Pereira. I'm not going to tell you how I think that one's going to go yet, but that obviously, the belt's on the line. That obviously has huge ramifications for the for the division as a whole. You've also got, I think I'm just going to double check now, but I think it's just a 3-round fight between Jiri Prochazka and Khalil Roundtree Jr. Let me double check. It is just 3 rounds, of course, because we've got the bantamweight title fight on that card as well. But you could be looking at Jiri Prochazka being back in a title contention spot. We know that the UFC like Jiri Prochazka. They're giving him multiple title shots. He's the former champion of the division. He did the noble thing by giving up the belt. But there's a good chance that if he beats Khalil Roundtree and beats him in spectacular fashion, then he gets the next shot, especially if Magomed Ankalaev wins that rematch in the UFC 320 main event. And the same could be said for Khalil Roundtree. Now, his fight in Baku against Jamahal Hill wasn't the most entertaining fight. I think he'll be the first to admit that. If he gets a spectacular finish against Jiri Prochazka, he could find himself straight back in the number one contender slot for the belt again, especially if Magomed Ankalaev loses. If Magomed Ankalaev wins, because it's a fresh matchup. Khalil Roundtree's already lost in that epic battle with Alex Pereira. He showed great heart in that one. But then you've got these two guys, Carlos Ulberg and Dominick Reyes. Now, like I said, Carlos Ulberg is undefeated in his last. Let me just double check how many he's won on the bounce, because he's won a lot on the bounce. He's got 8 wins on the bounce. A win over Dominick Reyes would stretch that streak to 9. You could be looking at the number one contender for the belt if he manages to finish Dominick Reyes in spectacular fashion. If Dominick Reyes can pull off the upset, and I think it is an upset, I think Carlos Ulberg will be the favourite going into this. Yeah, he's a moderate favourite, minus 250 on Tapology. If Dominick Reyes can pull off the upset and get the finish in Perth and silence the fans, that's big for Dominick Reyes. I don't think that he would get an immediate title shot, but that would certainly put him up there for a rematch against Jiri Prochazka, a fight against maybe the loser of Pereira versus Ankalaev, a fight potentially with Khalil Roundtree, depending on what Roundtree does at 320. So a win for each of these men is absolutely vital. How do I think this one is going to go, though? Let's take a look at the stats. Each man has got, they're pretty similar all round. Carlos Ulberg has got 14 fights. Dominick Reyes has got 19 fights. 13-1 for Carlos Ulberg, 15-4 for Dominick Reyes. And remember, those 4 came 4 on the bounce, all in the UFC as well. Average fight time, there's 10 seconds between them. You're talking 7.5 minutes each. Both men 6'4". Both men with a reach of 77 inches. Dominick Reyes is the older man by just a single year. These two men are very, very similar. One thing that does stand out for me is Ulberg fights in the orthodox stance. Dominick Reyes fights in southpaw, but Ulberg, the way that he fights is very karate heavy. I can see Dominick Reyes looking to really utilize a low leg kick, just like Jan Blachowicz did. Strikes landed per minute, 6.77 for Ulberg, 5.58 for Dominick Reyes. Both men have got knockout power, we know this. Ulberg hasn't actually finished a fight since Alonzo Menafield in 12 seconds back in 2024, May of last year. But Dominick Reyes has been finishing fights, very regularly. Striking accuracy, both, almost identical again, 54 and 55%. Strikes absorbed per minute. Carlos Ulberg absorbs sort of 1 more strike per minute than Dominick Reyes, but, you can't read too much into that. That takedown average is very interesting. 0.58 for Carlos Ulberg, 0.31 for Dominick Reyes. Neither man is particularly interested in taking the fight to the floor, so I can see this being a stand and bang kind of fight. But how do I actually think that those statistics are going to play into the fight? What I think is that, like I said, I think Dominick Reyes is going to. I think he's going to start quick, and a lot of it does depend on the crowd. Like I said, the uh, the crowd in there, there is a lot. All but one of the 14 fight card, sorry, has an Australian featuring in it. Statistics would show and probability would show that not all of those Australian fighters are actually going to win. But what happens if they win 3 or 4 on the bounce heading into the main event? That crowd is going to be all the way behind Carlos Ulberg. And just put pressure on Ulberg, of course, but I think Dominick Reyes is going to look to start quick. He is a quick start. Both men are quick starters, but Dominick Reyes in particular is a very quick starter. I think he'll look to hit the lower leg of Carlos Ulberg out of that karate stance and really take him off balance. I do think that he may even look to not take the fight to the floor, but may even look to grapple a little bit. Get Ulberg in the clinch, try and work because Ulberg is very muscular, so maybe try and wear him out, and see how he looks in the fourth and the fifth round because we haven't seen Carlos Ulberg in a fourth and fifth round yet. Dominick Reyes has gone the 5 round distance with John Jones, one of the best to ever do it. He's been scheduled for multiple 5 round fights throughout his career, so he knows what the 5 round and the main event, the 5 round distance in the main event feels like. I am picking Carlos Ulberg in this one. I'm picking him via decision because I don't think that I think the things that got Dominick Reyes into trouble when he went on that 4 fight losing streak, I don't think will get him into trouble against Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg is in a very difficult position where he's enjoying an 8 fight win streak, and with a win here, obviously, it extends that to 9. But he can't take the risk of getting knocked out by someone like Dominick Reyes, who we know for a fact has one punch knockout power, especially since, this kind of second career almost of Dominick Reyes after the 4 fight losing streak. He's got 15 wins, of which 10 have come via knockout. He's a really heavy hitter. So I don't think that Carlos Ulberg can risk getting knocked out by Dominick Reyes. I am picking Carlos Ulberg. I'm picking him to go to a decision across 25 minutes for the first time in his career. I don't think it'll be enough to get him a title shot, but I do think it'll be enough to really put his name in the title picture. The co-main event is Jack Jenkins versus Ramon Tavares. Jenkins coming off a loss against Gabriel Santos at UFC 312. Prior to that, he beat Herbert Burns, but Herbert Burns loses to everybody, to be honest. It's a strange choice for the co-main event, in my opinion. I'm not sure if we have had any pullouts because both men coming off a loss in the co-main event, not really something that I would choose to do. There's better fights on this card, if you ask me, for a co-main event. But like I said, it's very Australian heavy. Jack Jenkins, the Australian Jimmy Crute returning to action again. He retired, came back. He had the strange draw with Alonzo Menefield, then he lost, and then he had the strange draw with Rodolfo Bellato. And then he finally picked up his first win since 2020 when he defeated Marcin Prashnio last time out in the first round. He takes on Ivan Erslan, who is, I think he's lost 2 on the bounce. Let me double check that. Yeah, he's lost 2 on the bounce, and he's 1-3 in his last 4, with that only 1 win coming outside of the UFC for KSW. I don't really like this fight. I think it's a bit of a weird fight to have on the main card. Jimmy Crute is still only 29, but he's a good fighter. Jimmy Crute, he is. There's no denying that. He's had not the best look. He had the sort of dead leg, as it were, against Anthony Smith. He had the draws and then the losses. He's there because he's Australian, but I don't think that his form or the form of Ivan Erslan means that they should be on a main card, but it is what it is. A fight that definitely should be on the main card, and I would actually put it as a co-main event, is Jake Matthews versus Neil Magny. Jake Matthews is 3-1 in his last 4, with the only loss coming to Michael Morales, and that was via decision. He's a stalwart of the UFC, been in the UFC, let me see when he came into the UFC. 2014, so he's celebrating his 11th year in the UFC this year. He's won his last 3. His last performance in particular, a first round submission of Chidi and Jacani, which is a fantastic win for Jake Matthews. and he's taking on the kind of gatekeeper to the top 15 in Neil Magny. Neil Magny himself has been in the UFC for as long as I can remember. He was in the Ultimate Fighter season 16 in 2012 and made his official UFC debut in 2013. I mean, he's and just like Jake Matthews, he's fought a who's who. You know, he's got a win over Johnny Hendricks, former champion. He's got a win over Calvin Gastelum, waste of space. He's got losses to, you know, only the sort of upper echelons of the division. You Rafael dos Anjos at the time, Santiago Ponzinibbio at the time, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Gilbert Burns, Ian Machado, Gary, Michael Morales, Carlos Prates. I mean, he doesn't lose to just anybody, Neil Magny. And last time out, he rebounded from those 2 straight losses to Michael Morales and Carlos Prates with a win over Zaleski dos Santos. Zaleski dos Santos? Let me double check. Yeah, Capoeira, Zaleski dos Santos. That was only in August. I didn't realise that he'd only fought that recently, to be honest. But he's straight back in there against Jake Matthews, enemy territory. I think that's probably going to be one of the better, more technical fights on the card. Probably going to pick Neil Magny to win that, but it's a close one. You've got the debut of you've got Tom Nolan facing Charlie Campbell. Tom Nolan 9-1 fighting out of Australia. He's only 25 years old. He's 3-1 in the UFC. I can't lie and say that I know an awful lot about him. But Charlie Campbell filling in on short notice. Charlie Campbell, if you remember, is the gentleman that fought Chris Duncan on the Contender Series, pretty much knocked Chris Duncan out and then was caught badly and knocked out by Chris Duncan. Went back to the regional scene, has now got his opportunity in the UFC, and he's grabbed that opportunity with both hands. He's 2-0 in the UFC now. Scheduled to face Mauricio Rufy last year. He didn't go ahead with that. He had to withdraw from that. He did face Tom Nolan. He is taking the fight on short notice, but I think that'll be a good fight. And opening up the main card, we've got the big hitting heavyweights. We've got Louis Sutherland from Scotland and Justin Taffer, as we know, from Australia. Louis Sutherland, I believe he fought for the PFL. Yeah, he fought for the PFL when I was there. He lost to Abraham Balbi. He picked up a couple of wins in the PFL. Then he went and fought. I think he fought for Bellator as well, did he? Yeah, he fought for Bellator once. He's on a 4-fight winning run at the moment for Levels Fight League. Unfortunately for the Scotsman, I do think that unfortunately that there are levels to this game, and I think that Justin Taffer is just that level above those guys that he's been fighting, especially in Australia. Justin Taffer, you know, he did lose to Carl Williams. He did lose to Taliesin Teixeira. I don't think he's going to lose 3 in a row. I can see this being a pretty brutal knockout for Taffer. Other fights on the card that kind of stick out to me. I mean, other fighters at least that stick out to me. Rodolfo Bellato's on the card. That's a fun one. Loma Lookbome versus Alexia Saniara. Apologies if I have butchered the pronunciation of that. But if you remember, this is the girl that made her UFC debut against Molly McCann and battered Molly McCann and retired Molly McCann. She's got a big future ahead of her, and I think that she can be. I think that she's really, really good. As is Loma Lookbome. Oban Elliott returns. Obviously, he suffered that loss last time out in a pretty lackluster, for him anyway, a lackluster performance. He takes on Jonathan McAuliffe. Again, long-time listeners of the show know that I am dreadful at pronunciations. He is making his second UFC appearance after beating Kevin Jousset last time out. I think I can see Oban, the Welsh gangster, getting straight back in the win column with that one. Colby Thickness is returning. He filled in short notice to take on Toporia's brother. I remember a couple of, about 6 months ago. I thought he put in a good performance, to be honest. Jamie Mullarkey, never in a boring fight. I love Jamie Mullarkey. I love watching him fight. He just comes and leaves it all out there. And we've got the debut of Michelle Montague, the wild one, which I'm very excited for. She's got 6 wins, all of them by submission. She's 6-0. She I believe, yeah, she's fought for the PFL throughout her whole career. So they're not terrible people that she's been fighting. Oh, so she got one fight for Icon and one fight for Bellator, which is PFL, isn't it? I think that she's got a future. She's fighting Luana Carolina, who is a tough debut for anyone. But I do think that put a couple of wins together, and we could see Michelle Montague go do something in the UFC at least. But that is this weekend's UFC Perth card. It's not the greatest card in the world. I think the main event excellent, and like I said, if you're an Australian or you're from that sort of part of the world, this is a card for you because this is going to be a really, Australian heavy card. Like I said, I did just want to touch on UFC Rio de Janeiro with the unfortunate news that Rafael Fiziev is out of his main event slot against Charles Oliveira. Could this be a blessing in disguise for Charles Oliveira because he was looking to return very soon after that brutal knockout at the hands of Ilia Topuria. He was rendered savagely unconscious just in June, and now he looked to return in October against another heavy hitter in Rafael Fiziev. Fiziev's obviously had to withdraw from that fight due to injury, and unfortunately, I don't think that they're going to look to replace Fiziev. I would have liked to see Charles Oliveira remain on the card, but him not being on the card for his personal health is probably a better thing. For the card itself, it's rough. It's not a great card. I'm just looking down Tapology now. The co-main event was Deiveson Figueiredo versus Montel Jackson. It's a fun fight. It's not a main event. Gabriel Bonfim versus Randy Brown is a great fight. That is potentially the best main event that they're probably going to get if they want to bump those guys up to main event, which I don't think they will do. I was looking at the UFC 320 card yesterday or this morning, just to see if there's any fights that we can kind of steal from UFC 320. Say we'll still give you your pay-per-view money, but can you headline a week later? Abu Magomedov versus Joe Pfeiffer is the only one that I can imagine that they would pull from that card, and I don't think they'll do that. I mean, is Edmund Shabazian versus Andre Muniz a headliner in 2025? There's worse headliners booked, if I'm honest. Steve Garcia and David Onama come to mind. I don't know what they're going to do with UFC Rio de Janeiro unless they just get a whole new main event of fighters that are not on the card yet and do not have a fight booked. Obviously, the hope is that you would have Brazilians on that card because of where it is. But, I mean, you're struggling to find, A, Brazilians without a fight, and B, Brazilians that are going to be willing to step in there on short notice for 5 rounds. You're really struggling. What is frustrating is that a lot of the lightweight division should be jumping at the chance to fight Charles Oliveira, who is coming off, win one, lose one form. Is coming off the devastating KO at the hands of Ilia Topuria just in June. You should have a whole host of guys in that lightweight division putting their hands up and saying, give me that fight. Even if I'm Arman Tsarukyan, I know his last fight was against Charles Oliveira, and that was only in December. Oh, was it December of last year? No, it wasn't December of last year. It was earlier than that. It was UFC 300 in April of last year, but Arman Tsarukyan has been out of the question since then. Arman Tsarukyan, maybe offer your name out there. I know that you probably is waiting for a bigger fight, but Paddy the Baddy, go into enemy territory, take the fight on short notice, and say to Dana White, self-belief, when I beat Charles Oliveira, are you going to guarantee me a title shot at Ilia Topuria next? Do that, because you've never seen Paddy the Baddy go 5 rounds in the UFC. Paddy the Baddy could say, give me a title shot with a win over Charles Oliveira, because at the moment it's up in the air. He's not getting, I don't think he will get the next title shot. Mateusz Gamrot, one winning, I'm struggling here, 1 fight winning run. You know, you've got Dan Hooker. Can Dan Hooker make the weight? Can we make a catch weight? Renato Moicano doesn't really make sense. You know, all Brazilian affair. He's coming off 2 straight losses. I wonder what the sort of Alexander Hernandez. I mean, Alexander Hernandez versus Charles Oliveira would probably be a good fight. Hernandez didn't take a lot of damage in that fight against Diego Ferreira last week. Can he make a quick sort of month-long turnaround? I don't know, but can we make a catch weight? I'm not sure. Benoit Saint Denis. Could we make a Benoit Saint Denis fight? Someone like a Mauricio Hufi, who would get a ton of respect from the fans if he, you know, he lost in Paris, he lost in dominant fashion. People were saying, oh, he's all hype, he's all talk. If he returned on short notice for a main event, all Brazilian clash, that would be phenomenal. And I think it would, and let's say he won, not only does he place himself right bang top in the top 15, top 10, top 5 maybe, but you can shush a lot of the fans. Put your name in the hat. A lot of these guys, in my opinion, should be putting their names in the hat. Alexander Hernandez, Paddy the Baddy, maybe even a Dan Hooker should all be putting their names in the hat. But from what I've read, they're not putting their name in the hat. They're not interested in the fight, which I appreciate. Charles Oliveira is a tough fight for anyone, but if there was ever a good time to get Charles Oliveira, it's now. What, 2.5 months after a brutal knockout. That is your UFC Perth preview and UFC Rio de Janeiro moan, I guess. Let me know who you think should replace Rafael Fiziev in the comments below. Let me know who you think will win the UFC Perth main event. I think it's going to go the way of Carlos Ulberg, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a Dominick Reyes upset. Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what type of videos you want me to record as well, because, you know, this is the community that we're looking to build here at MMA Sucker. Any ideas for videos that you've got, drop them in the link below. Drop us a tweet at MMA Sucker. Drop me a tweet at Frazer Krohn MMA. And let me know what you want to see. Thanks for listening, guys, and I will catch you next time.